Good evening. This is All India Radio. I am Tanvi Taneja and with me is R.S. Raghu with the evening news. The headlines. Cabinet approves asset monetization of subsidiaries of Power Grid Corporation of India through Infrastructure Trust. Prime Minister Narendra Modi appreciates the role of media in creating awareness in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Government says India's COVID-19 cases per million is amongst the lowest in the world. Recovery rate reaches 77.65%. Indian Army says at no stage it transgressed across the LAC or resorted to use of any aggressive means. Railway Minister Piyush Goyal urges industry leaders to partner with Indian Railways to provide cost-effective solutions in logistics sector. And 5 PSUs under the Petroleum Ministry to join the International Solar Alliance Coalition for Sustainable Climate Action. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has approved asset monetization of subsidiaries of Power Grid Corporation of India Limited, Power Grid, through Infrastructure Investment Trust. It has given approval to Power Grid to undertake monetization of its tariff-based competitive bidding TBCB assets held in existing Special Purpose Vehicle SPVs through Infrastructure Investment Trust. The approval would facilitate Power Grid to undertake asset monetization of its identified TBCB transmission assets through Infrastructure Investment Trust so that the proceeds from asset monetization could be utilized for fresh investment in the transmission network expansion and other capital schemes of the company. In the first block, Power Grid would be able to monetize 5 TBCB assets of gross block of 7,164 crore rupees. The assets proposed for monetization through Infrastructure Investment Trust are operational assets proposed to be managed by the existing manpower of Power Grid already deputed for this purpose, and therefore no additional employment generation is envisaged with regard to them. However, additional employment opportunities are likely in services incidental to the trust such as merchant banking, legal advisory, trusteeship, financial and taxation consultancy, valuation, printing, advertisements and in allied activities. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has lauded the role of the media in fighting the COVID pandemic. The Prime Minister said the media has served people in an unprecedented way by spreading awareness on COVID pandemic and by analyzing government works and pointing out their shortcomings.
मीडिया ने जागरूकता बढ़ाने का काम किया है, सकारात्मक काम किया है। महामारी के इस दौर में कोरोना के खिलाफ जागरूकता अभियान में भी भारतीय मीडिया ने जनता की अभूतपूर्व सेवा की है। सरकार के कार्यों की विवेचना, सरकार की योजनाओं में जमीनी स्तर पर जो कमियां हैं, उसे बताना, उसकी आलोचना करना, ये भी हमारा मीडिया बखूबी करता रहा है।
The Prime Minister was addressing the inauguration of the Patrika Gate in Jaipur through video conference. He said the enlightened section of the society and writers are like guides and teachers of the community. He said during the freedom struggle, every big name was associated with writing. The Prime Minister also called for inculcating the habit of reading books among the new generation. The Prime Minister also asserted that the voice of India, along with Indian products, is becoming more global, with the country now enjoying stronger presence at world bodies. He said the world is now listening to India more attentively.
आज जब लोकल के लिए वोकल होने की बात कर रहे हैं, मुझे खुशी है कि हमारा मीडिया इस संकल्प को एक बड़े अभियान की शक्ल दे रहा है। भारत के लोकल प्रोडक्ट्स तो ग्लोबल हो ही रहे हैं, लेकिन भारत की आवाज भी अब ज्यादा ग्लोबल हो रही है। दुनिया भारत को अब और ज्यादा ध्यान से सुनती है। आज लगभग हर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंच पर भारत की बहुत मजबूत उपस्थिति है। ऐसे में भारतीय मीडिया को भी ग्लोबल होने की जरूरत है।
The iconic Patrika Gate is built by the Patrika Group of newspapers on the Jawaharlal Nehru Marg in Jaipur. Prime Minister Modi also released 2 books written by the group chairman Gulab Kothari on the occasion. Governor of the state Kalraj Mishra and Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot also attended the function.
The centre has said that India's COVID-19 cases per million population is among the lowest in the world, which stands at 3,102 in comparison to 3,527 cases for the world. Addressing media in New Delhi today, Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan said, as India has lowest deaths per million population, the case fatality rate CFR is also declining continuously. He said it was at 2.15% in the first week of August and now it stands at 1.70%. He said there is progressive rise in the recovery from COVID-19 infection. India has 53 deaths per million population, whereas world's average stands at 115. Mr. Bhushan said that so far over 33 lakh patients have been cured. 73,642 patients have recovered in the last 24 hours, which is the highest single-day COVID-19 recovery. The recovery rate has now reached 77.65%. The Health Secretary said as the number of recoveries is increasing, the gap between active and recovered cases is also increasing. He said till date there are 8,83,697 active cases and the number of recovered cases are 33,23,950. The Health Secretary also informed that there is an exponential increase in the tests per million population and 21 states and union territories are performing more tests per million than the national average. He said more than 5 crore samples were tested so far and more than 10 lakh tests conducted daily in the week. He said the centre has repeatedly urged states and union territories to conduct mandatory RT-PCR tests for those symptomatic patients who have tested negative in rapid antigen tests.
तो हमारा राज्य सरकारों से बार बार ये अनुरोध रहता है कि आईसीएमआर की गाइडलाइंस हैं, स्वास्थ्य मंत्रालय की गाइडलाइन है कि सिम्प्टोमेटिक नेगेटिव जो रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट में आए उनका मैंडेटरी आवश्यक रूप से आरटीपीसीआर टेस्ट किया जाना है. ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण तथ्य है. अगर उसमें 100 लोग भी छूट जाते हैं तो वो कितने लोगों को पोटेंशियली इन्फेक्शन दे सकते हैं, ये चिंता की बात है.
Member Health Niti Aayog Dr. V.K. Paul stressed on the need to follow social distancing and hand hygiene. He said testing has been increased and will be further enhanced. He emphasized the need to create an environment where no one is afraid of COVID-19 testing. Dr. Paul said it is dangerous to the individual and to the system if one does not test despite experiencing symptoms. In response to a question, Dr. Paul said Russia has requested India's help in manufacturing of vaccine by Indian companies and conduct of phase 3 studies in India. He said India attaches high importance to the request on both fronts. There has been considerable progress. He further elaborated on vaccine development.
आईसीएमआर भारत बायोटेक जो है वो फेज 1 उनका कंप्लीट है. आज से फेज 2 की एनरोलमेंट शुरू हो गई है. ये भारत बायोटेक है, ये हिंदुस्तानी वैक्सीन है, ये किल्ड वैक्सीन है, इसके ऊपर ये स्टेटस है. फिर अब बात आती है जो हमारा कैटला जाइडस का है, वो वैक्सीन ट्रायल जो है वो भी अब फेज 1 खत्म होके फेज 2 भी अच्छी प्रोग्रेस में चला हुआ है. तो ये 2 हमारे इंडिजिनस वैक्सीन हैं जो कि हिंदुस्तानी अपने ही वॉलंटियर्स के ऊपर फेज 1 और फेज 2 की तरफ अग्रसर हो रहे हैं बहुत तेजी से, बहुत सैटिस्फैक्टरी तरीके से.
The Uttar Pradesh government has announced that from now on there will be no restrictions on economic activities in the state and the ongoing Sunday lockdown has been lifted. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has asked officials to increase the economic activities in the state along with creating awareness amongst the general public about the pandemic. He said that after getting success in ease of doing business, now it's time for ease of living, which will bring phenomenal change in the life of the people. Our correspondent has filed this report.
After reviewing the unlock scenario in the state, Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath ordered for the end of weekly restrictions which were being imposed in the state from last 2 months. Now all markets can open on Sundays also, and they will be closed as per their earlier schedule instead of the weekly closure. Hotels and restaurants in the state will now open following all safety measures except those who fall in containment zone. Chief Minister also asked to prepare 1,000 ICU beds in the 3 premier medical institutes of state capital Lucknow. He also instructed to ensure COVID testing of every person living in containment zones. Sushil Chandra Tiwari, AIR News, Lucknow.
Amid the raging outbreak of coronavirus in Maharashtra, Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray today exhorted people to participate in the mass movement to curb the spread of the pandemic. Speaking in the State Legislative Assembly this evening, the Chief Minister said the government will initiate a public awareness program as a large number of cases are now being reported from rural areas as well. Details from our Mumbai correspondent.
Announcing that the Chase the Virus program has yielded desired results in Mumbai, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray said it's time that the program is extended across the state. Accordingly, the district administration will now be responsible for tracing a minimum of 20 to 30 contacts of a coronavirus infected patient and to put them under strict quarantine. This will ensure that the chain is broken and the infection is contained. Stating that the program will be launched on 15th September, the Chief Minister said the initiative called Majhe Kutum Majhi Jawabdari, that is, My Family, My Responsibility, can only be successful if citizens, political parties and NGOs support it. With Kunal Shinde, this is Nisha Rani for AIR News, Mumbai.
Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Edappadi Palaniswamy called on the State Governor Banwarilal Purohit at Raj Bhavan in Chennai this afternoon. He handed over a brief report about the ongoing COVID-19 control measures in the state. His meeting comes ahead of the State Assembly session, which is scheduled to be held from 14th of this month. The total number of COVID-19 infections in Tamil Nadu has reached nearly 4.75 lakh mark, with 5,684 people testing positive today. The number of recoveries has gone up to 4.16 lakh. More from our correspondent.
The Speaker P. Dhanapal has mandated all the members of the State Assembly and its officials to get tested for COVID-19 3 days ahead of the session that begins on Monday. A decision on it has been arrived at a meeting convened by him with the State Health Minister, Chief Secretary, senior officials and the Director General of Police. The legislators will be tested by the health officials of the districts concerned on Friday. The staff of the House and the accredited news persons are required to have COVID negative certificate at hand before entering the premises where the session is to be held. The session is expected to continue for 4 days. Jai Singh, AIR News, Chennai.
Kerala continues to report surge in COVID cases as 3,026 new COVID cases were confirmed today. More from our correspondent.
Bringing great concern, among the new cases, 89 health workers also tested positive. 1,862 recoveries were reported today in the state. The total active COVID cases in Kerala rose to 23,217. Meanwhile, the death toll in the state due to COVID reached 372 as 13 more deaths were confirmed today. Meanwhile, Met Department predicts heavy rain across the state for coming 2 days. Fisherfolks are warned from venturing into the sea in Kerala Lakshadweep coast. Mayusha for AR News from Thiruvananthapuram.
In Meghalaya, 156 people recovered from COVID-19 today, taking the total number of recoveries to 1,716. 42 new cases were also reported, bringing the total active cases to 1,343. So far, Meghalaya has recorded a total of 3,076 COVID-19 cases. Out of them, 1,716 have recovered, 1,343 are under treatment and 17 people succumbed to it. You are listening to the evening news on All India Radio. Reminder of the headlines before we move on. Cabinet approves asset monetization of subsidiaries of Power Grid Corporation of India through Infrastructure Trust. Prime Minister Narendra Modi appreciates the role of media in creating awareness in fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Government says India's COVID-19 cases per million is amongst the lowest in the world. Recovery rate reaches 77.65%. Indian Army says at no stage it transgressed across the LAC or resorted to use of any aggressive means. Railways Minister Piyush Goyal urges industry leaders to partner with Indian Railways to provide cost-effective solutions in logistics sector. And 5 PSUs under Petroleum Ministry to join International Solar Alliance Coalition for Sustainable Climate Action. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
All India Radio presents World News. News and views from across the globe. What happened? What is up next? The newsmakers and the highlights of the day. Every day at 10:20 p.m. in the night. On 100.1 FM, All India Radio.
The army today asserted that India is committed to disengagement and de-escalating the situation on the line of actual control LAC. It, however, said China continues to undertake provocative activities to escalate. At no stage has the Indian army transgressed across the LAC or resorted to use of any aggressive means, including firing. An official statement of the army said the PLA has been blatantly violating agreements and carrying out aggressive maneuvers while the engagement at military, diplomatic and political level is in progress. Yesterday, it was the PLA troops that attempted to close in one of the forward positions along the LAC. After being dissuaded by the army, the PLA troops fired a few rounds in the air in an attempt to intimidate. In an exclusive discussion with All India Radio News, Director of Society for Policy Studies, Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar said,
reports that have come in indicate that the Chinese PLA troops had fired shots to intimidate the Indian army deployed within Indian territory. This is disturbing since it is the first time that shots have been fired across the line of actual control. More so when high-level political talks have taken place at the defense minister level, and it is expected that the foreign ministers of India and China will meet on Thursday. The message to Beijing is clear: India will not be intimidated.
However, despite the grave provocation, the army exercised great restraint and behaved in a mature and responsible manner. The Indian army said it is committed to maintain peace and tranquility. However, it is also determined to protect national integrity and sovereignty at all costs. External Affairs Ministry today termed the reports in Chinese state media attributing some comments to National Security Advisor Ajit Doval as completely false and baseless. In a statement, the ministry urged the media to refrain from such speculative reporting. The Indian Army has said that formalities for the early transfer of 5 youths of Arunachal Pradesh is being coordinated with the Chinese Army. Tezpur-based Defence PRO Lieutenant Colonel Harshvardhan Pandey said that as a result of persistent efforts of the Indian Army, 5 missing hunters from Indian side of LAC in Upper Subhansiri, who had inadvertently crossed over to the other side on 2nd of this month, have been traced. He said Chinese army today responded on hotline and confirmed that the missing Indians have been found on their side.
Minister of Railways Piyush Goyal has urged the industry leaders to collaborate with Indian Railways in the journey of transformation. Addressing the second edition of Rail Connect organized by the Confederation of Indian Industries, the minister urged the industry leaders to collaborate and partner with Indian Railways to provide cost-effective solutions in logistics sector and reduce logistic costs. He also stressed that Atmanirbhar Railway depends on the participation of both railways and industry. He said Indian Railways is rightly referred as the growth engine of the country by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He said his vision is to make Indian Railways a strong entity which serves customers with modern technology and good service experience. He added, during COVID phase, Indian Railways utilized the opportunity of removing bottlenecks, maintenance, running Shramik trains, bring back freight share, making policy changes, engaging with private sector, technology providers and improving infrastructure. The minister also said that Indian Railways is pacing towards becoming net zero carbon emitter. Chairman Railway Board Vinod Kumar Yadav in his address outlined the plan for Indian Railways transformation and expressed that Railways is open for collaborations and partnerships with the industry. India and the Asian Development Bank ADB today signed a $500 million loan for Delhi Meerut Regional Rapid Transit System RRTS corridor. The first tranche of a total $1 billion facility to build a modern, high-speed 82-kilometer Delhi-Meerut RRTS corridor will improve regional connectivity and mobility in India's National Capital Region NCR. The signatories to the loan agreement for the Delhi-Meerut RRTS investment project were Samir Kumar Khare, Additional Secretary in the Finance Ministry of Finance, and Kenichi Yokoyama, Country Director of ADB's India Resident Mission, who signed for ADB. The first tranche loan will support construction of the first of the 3 priority rail corridors planned under the NCR Regional Plan 2021 to connect Delhi to other cities in the adjoining states. Mr. Khare said the project will provide better connectivity to allow other towns in the NCR to develop as urban economic centers surrounded by residential areas while easing the concentration pressure on Delhi.
Petroleum and Natural Gas Minister Dharmendra Pradhan today said that 5 public sector undertakings, PSUs, under his ministry will be joining the International Solar Alliance ISA Coalition for Sustainable Climate Action as corporate partners. In his inaugural speech at the first World Solar Technology Summit organized by ISA, the minister said that Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Limited, ONGC, Indian Oil Corporation Limited, IOCL, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, BPCL, Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, HPCL, and GAIL India Limited will be contributing to ISA's Corpus Fund. He said Indian oil and gas companies are actively taking part in this clean energy transition. He said in order to reduce the carbon footprint, these companies will be focusing more on green energy investments such as renewables and biofuels. He said the government is also actively encouraging industry as well as oil and gas companies to become participants in this solar transition. On the achievements made in the sector so far, the minister said that the oil and gas companies are also making efforts to deploy solar panels across the value chain of their operations, and current installed solar power capacity is 270 megawatt. He said an additional 60 megawatt solar capacity will be added in the coming year. The minister added the government has taken up the mission of solarizing about 50% of fuel stations owned by public sector oil companies in the next 5 years. He said more than 5,000 fuel stations of Indian Oil were solarized last year. Today is International Literacy Day. This day is celebrated on the 8th of September every year to remind everyone of the importance of literacy for individuals, communities and societies. This year the focus is on literacy, teaching and learning in the COVID-19 crisis and beyond. The theme highlights literacy in a lifelong learning perspective. Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank has said that the government is committed to work towards achieving 100% literacy by complying with the reforms within the National Education Policy 2020. Addressing International Literacy Day event virtually today, the minister said government, organizations, Gram Sabhas and other stakeholders have to work in mission mode to achieve their target. He asked officials of the ministry to review the literacy program every 2 months. He added a big chunk of the population is still not literate and more efforts are required in this direction. He said the new education policy is based on the country's ethos and value system. The minister hoped that the new literacy scheme, Padhna Likhna Abhiyan, is going to be a leap forward to achieve the goal of total literacy by 2030. The principal target of the program is to impart functional literacy and numeracy to 57 lakh non-literate and non-numerate adults in both rural and urban areas across the country in the age group of 15 years and above.
The Karnataka High Court has stayed the new law to provide a reservation of 25% of the total seats to the students of Karnataka in the National Law School of India University in Bengaluru. A division bench of Justice B.V. Nagaratna and Justice Ravi V. Hosmani passed the interim order today. In March, the State Legislative Assembly had passed the NLSIU Amendment Act to give 25% horizontal reservation to those who studied for a minimum of 10 years in Karnataka. The interim order was passed by the division bench after an application was filed by the university about its decision to conduct its own entrance test on September 12th for selection of students for the current academic year. Hence, the bench issued an interim order today subject to its final verdict on the reservation issue. The bench also issued certain directions on preparing the merit list based on the Law University's aptitude test. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will be attending the meeting of Council of Foreign Ministers of Shanghai Cooperation Organization to be held in Moscow on 9th and 10th of this month. This will be the third Council of Foreign Ministers CFM meeting that India will be attending as a full member of SCO. Earlier, two meetings were held in Beijing on April 2018 and Bishkek on May 2019. India has been taking active part in various SCO dialogue mechanisms under the chairmanship of the Russian Federation this year. The SCO summit will be held in the near future. The CFM meeting in Moscow will review the preparations for the forthcoming SCO summit and also exchange views on the international and regional issues. External Affairs Ministers' visit in Moscow will include the participation in the Council of SCO Foreign Ministers and other bilateral meetings.
The Narcotics Control Bureau NCB has arrested Riya Chakrabarti in a drug case related to actor Sushant Singh Rajput's death probe. The arrest comes after 3 days of questioning. Her brother Shovik Chakrabarti, Sushant's house manager Samuel Miranda and house help Dipesh Sawant were arrested last week in the case. The Central Crime Branch sleuths in Bengaluru have taken actor Sanjana Galrani into their custody in connection with the drug case. The police raided Sanjana's house today, after which she was taken into custody. So far, the police have arrested Kannada film actor Ragini Dwivedi and alleged drug peddlers Niyaz Ravishankar, Rahul, Viren Khanna and a foreign national Loem Pepper Samba in the drug case. Ragini Dwivedi was taken into police custody for 5 days after an order from the First Additional Chief Metropolitan Magistrate Court yesterday. Viren Khanna, who is accused of organizing drugs during parties, was arrested from Delhi on September the 4th. The crime branch had intensified its investigation after the Narcotics Control Bureau had arrested 3 persons in Bengaluru who are accused of supplying drugs to singers and actors in Sandalwood, the Kannada film industry. Filmmaker and journalist Indrajit Lankesh had given a statement to the crime branch claiming that at least 15 people in the industry were involved in the drug trade.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold Swanidhi Samvad tomorrow with street vendors from Madhya Pradesh. The Government of India had launched PM Swanidhi scheme on 1st June this year to help poor street vendors impacted by COVID-19 to resume livelihood activities. 4.5 lakh street vendors were registered in Madhya Pradesh, with more than 4 lakh vendors having been given identification and vendor certification. The applications of 2.45 lakh eligible beneficiaries have been presented through the portal to banks, out of which acceptance has been granted to around 1.4 lakh street vendors of amount worth 140 crore rupees. The state of Madhya Pradesh stands first in the number of total applications accepted, with 47% of these coming from the state alone. Arrangements for beneficiaries of the scheme in the state to watch the program in public places have been made through LED screens in 378 municipal bodies. The program will be telecast through webcast, for which pre-registration is being done on MyGov's link pmevents.ncog.gov.in. In a tweet, Prime Minister said he is very eager about the Swanidhi Samvad, and during this special conversation, people will get an opportunity to know the experience of the hard-working street vendors of Madhya Pradesh.
Now let us take a look at the weather forecast for tomorrow. National capital Delhi will have strong surface winds during daytime. It will have a minimum temperature of 26 degrees Celsius and the maximum would be 37 degrees. In Mumbai, there will be a generally cloudy sky with possibility of development of thunder or lightning. The minimum temperature will be 25 and the maximum will be around 32. Chennai will have a generally cloudy sky with a few spells of rain or thunder showers. The temperature will hover between 27 and 35 degrees Celsius. Kolkata will see a partly cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. The minimum temperature in the metropolis will be around 27 while the maximum will be 34. On to the north, the minimum temperature will be 24 in Jammu while the maximum will be around 35. In Srinagar, the minimum temperature will be around 13 while the maximum will be 29. In Gilgit, the temperature will hover between 13 and 32 degrees Celsius. In Muzaffarabad, there will be mainly clear sky, becoming partly cloudy towards afternoon or evening. The temperature will hover between 20 and 34 degrees Celsius. Ladakh will have partly cloudy sky. The temperature will hover between 15 and 27 degrees Celsius. And now, before we close, the headlines once again. Cabinet approves asset monetization of subsidiaries of Power Grid Corporation of India through Infrastructure Trust. Prime Minister Narendra Modi appreciates role of media in creating awareness in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Government says India's COVID-19 cases per million is among the lowest in the world. Recovery rate reaches 77.65%. Indian Army says at no stage it transgressed across the LAC or resorted to use of any aggressive means. And 5 PSUs under Petroleum Ministry to join the International Solar Alliance Coalition for Sustainable Climate Action. And with that, we end the evening news. Good night.